Welcome to Season 5 of the Color Success Podcast, where we talk with guests from AAPI and ethnic minority communities and have real discussions about mental health and what success looks like. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Before we get into it, remember to subscribe to our mailing list for free at colorsuccesspodcast.com so you don't miss any updates. There, you will find our socials, YouTube channel, and all episodes on streaming platforms for great additional content. Fiona Kong is a former analyst turned founder of the Home Sweet Homes Journal. After becoming a single mom, she created this tool to help families stay connected and empower kids to process big feelings, build their self-esteem, and become their best selves. She lives in Los Angeles with her 6-year-old son, Emil. So Fiona, thank you so much for joining me on the show today and reaching out. We're going to be talking all things co-parenting, but I wanted to understand a little bit more about your journey in terms of becoming a co-parenting champion, as I have labeled you. So feel free to use that as marketing. Could you tell us a little bit more about your journey in terms of becoming a co-parenting champion?
Yes. So my story began, I guess, back in 2019. That's when we decided to split up. And a lot of it has to do with my childhood, and it's very deeply rooted in that. It's really brought me on this journey to create a tool that's helping kids of divorce everywhere and families feel more connected. So that's kind of where things began. And yeah, now my business is called Home Sweet Homes Journal. And yeah, I just a little bit about me. I live in LA with my son. He's 6 years old. And this idea started as like a $2 planner I bought at a dollar store. I'll stop there, but that's kind of like a little bit of background about me.
Well, 6 years old is a really fun time because starting to have these conversations with them and using vocabulary, it just explodes at that time. So when did you decide that, hey, it is time to separate or divorce your partner? Because that takes a lot of guts as well to say, hey, we're going to do this and try to figure it out. Because a lot of people do stay with their partner because of their children.
Yes, very true. And, looking back at my parents' relationship, I'm fully convinced they should have been divorced. It was constant conflict. My dad was not a very nice person. We don't have a relationship now. And so growing up, I feel like I was never modeled, what a real relationship should be, like the communication, working out problems, being in a loving environment. And, they say you should never separate from a partner within their first 5 years of having a child because it's so hard. Like it is unbelievably hard on all facets of life. You're tired, you're stressed, you're not getting enough sleep, and all these other things. For us, I think it was year 2, and there were a lot of things going on, but I feel like we weren't on the same page as far as, communication. And really, I asked myself, could we grow together? I think that's such an important question. If you want to, you need to support each other's dreams and, your life. And even if, yeah, just be able to support one another. And we actually had gone to therapy. And again, it's actually really hard to find a good therapist as well. It's like dating, finding the right person to talk to. We weren't able to do that, unfortunately. And I think just by then, we had grown so far apart that we decided, in a therapy session that we were going to split up.
and I say this in many interviews because I work with a lot of couples, the goal in my perspective is not necessarily to get the couple back together, but to get on the same page. And sometimes that does mean separation or divorce. And so that expectation that a lot of couples go in like, fix me. I'm like, even with individuals, I'm like, I can't, it's not about that. It's about getting on the same page and being able to help the clients help themselves, essentially, like give them the skills. So you referenced your parents' relationship. How did that impact your upbringing, your mental health, and essentially your romantic relationship?
Right, great question. Growing up, and I'm not going to generalize, this is very stereotypical, but a lot of Asian households, it's, the male is very dominant, and
Not in this household.
control. Awesome. But my father, he was very controlling. There was definitely emotional abuse, physical as well. So growing up, I felt like I never had a voice. I could never express myself. I felt never validated. And that it just caused me to be really shy. Like growing up in school, I never spoke up. I was just so timid and afraid. Um, and it started really young, and it all throughout middle school, high school, I just wanted to, I guess, be invisible and not wanted any attention because it was so uncomfortable to me. Because when at home, if I got any attention, from my father, it was always negative. So I felt like that was a bad thing. And it took me so long to realize that how unhealthy, like decades, right, of growing up in this environment was um, just so devastating, And when I finally left home, I was in my early 20s, and I feel like I was very behind socially. As I said, I never seen what a healthy relationship looked like. So I kind of had a string of, I don't want to say bad, but just when you don't know who you are, you don't know what your value is and how to, I think everyone's figuring it out, right? Like your 20s, like who really knows? But it was especially hard because I got into an abusive relationship later on, and that pattern sustained because that was what I was used to in many ways. That makes sense.
And I think that's what happens in a lot of cycles of violence. And a lot of people that haven't experienced that say, well, why does the woman or the partner go back? And it's like, well, this is what people know. And it may be obviously awful. And this is the comfort level, even though it seems counterintuitive, that people have. And so if you don't have role models or an example of a positive relationship, maybe, and please, like, tell me, how did you understand or conceptualize your relationship in those times?
Yeah. I think, you know, when you're seeking out a relationship, you just find what feels good at the moment. You're not necessarily thinking about, I mean, I don't know if I was thinking long term, like you're just
Sure.
dating, but um, it was a huge problem not knowing who I was, like a huge problem. Like, um, not understanding my background, my childhood, and having sat through those feelings of all these years of like what I really experienced. And I don't know if many people can understand that unless they've gone through, some kind of traumatic event. And I mentioned like this was years for me, like 2 decades of just like being silenced and not being able to, not knowing myself. So yeah, on the relationship front, I mean, my son's dad, like he's such a good man, I must say, like such a good man, but I don't think I could have been a great partner until I fixed all this stuff, all this big,
Process.
these big things that I had that were kind of, preventing me from really knowing what I wanted and needed.
So, I mean, it sounds like, and I'm not trying to play therapist here, but to hold in all those resentments and not kind of communicate them, eventually they do bubble up on the surface. So, how did you get from not knowing who you were, going through abusive situations to, I'm sounds like now you've done a lot of processing.
I have. I think it was probably about a year after we had been co-parenting. So this was 2020 during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right? I think
Difficult time.
everyone had this like, oh my gosh, this time to process their life and really sit with like everyone had time, right? So funny. So I was home alone. My son was with his dad, and I asked myself, like, how did I get here? Right? You always think your relationship will work out. You would have a family, you would have the 2.5 kids and the dog, and you just assume that would be the case. So I sat there one day, I was at my kitchen table, I was like, how did I get here? And it made me think about, my first memory as a child. And it made me think about my first memory of a child was a very traumatic one where my dad was punishing me. And then I just went through as many experiences as I could because I've actually blocked out a lot of things because I was in really like I felt unsafe at home.
Yeah.
So I had blocked out so many memories. I was trying to remember as many as I could, good or bad. And what, when I thought about my parents and just how much I had adapted and adopted like some of the ways they had, some of the things in their relationship, how they handled problems. My mom wouldn't speak to my dad, like when
the silent treatment.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, like how did I become that? And really acknowledging that my part in it and to say, hey, I was wrong. I didn't do things well. That's not to say, I mean, I hate to use the word blame, but I did the best I could at the time.
Sure.
With what I knew. So it really was just taking accountability for myself and one day, at that point, my son's dad and I had a very business-like relationship. We only talked about our son. We would never, it was like a very neutral relationship. But I called him one day and I apologized for, all the things I thought I needed to, that I owed him for. And he actually said to me, he's like, I've been wanting to tell you the same thing, or I've been wanting to call you and, have this conversation with you too. And it was a very like great conversation that was needed to kind of like that elephant in the room to kind of move forward. Cause I was like, I can't co-parent like this for the rest of our life. Like just not being able to, on a very like surface level interaction. Like I can't stand that. Like it felt very fake.
It was like you were both holding on though to all these thoughts and feelings. It's almost like the conversation that you were going to have or could have had in therapy, but it took you all this self-discovery and really taking a look at yourself to be able to initiate that conversation.
I know. And it's like, why does it have to happen on our, it has to happen by ourselves, right? Nobody can, even if someone had told me, like, hey, these are the things you did. If someone had told me that, I would have been like, I don't know if I would have been able to, reach that point.
Well, the timing and the ego, your ego is very fragile, using Freudian terms. And so I don't know if that would have really sunk in versus it bringing up the defenses or the avoidance. And, at any rate, so it sounds like through that conversation, it springboarded you guys to have a more productive relationship to co-parent your son. So, I mean, one of the things that I really like that you said was you took accountability. It's not to say that you're to blame for everything. The and part is, I think a lot of times when people are co-parenting, there's a lot of conflict, either overt or covert. And so, how do you, not to generalize, but what advice or guidance do you give folks when there is conflict there? Because your journals, and we'll get to that, would be very helpful. The and part is, I'm thinking about some parents that are just like, I'm not going to write in a journal or like even talk to my partner. So, how do you
Yeah.
facilitate that?
Yeah. This is a tough one because, as I said, unless you're sort of willing to, do the work and recognize that, you know, just co-parenting is so hard because this isn't about you, like it is, I've always say, ask yourself, will this matter in, 5 or 10 years? Like these
Yeah.
little trivial issues that you guys are bickering over, like big, big, big scheme of things, they don't matter, right? Like, and you totally miss if it impacts your child's emotional health, their mental well-being, their happiness, right? Like, whatever I make a decision, it's like, okay, is this helping or hurting my child? And that's a very simple question that I think it's just a good check, like having this conversation with a co-parent, and choosing to fight over, the shoes that got left behind, something,
Yeah.
it's like, who cares? Who cares? So, if there's a lot of times co-parents fight about like keeping stuff at each other's house.
Sure.
Our son is allowed to bring anything he wants, whatever it is, like we don't care, like food, whatever. um and I hear other relationships where they're like nothing is allowed, and I'm like, this ultimately is hurting your child, and I hope that people in this situation can, like really just see how every choice you make impacts your child and how they're shaped and formed.
So, what values are you hoping to instill in your son?
Uh, so I thought about this a lot when I was creating the journal
Yeah.
because I also wanted a teaching tool, because things that I never got as a child, that I never heard, right? You're enough, believe in yourself, you are loved, right? Like love yourself. Um, so there are 13 affirmations in the book. And I actually like thought of each one, like which are the ones I needed to hear for my inner child. Um, like you can do hard things. That I love that one. I am thankful. So um, all of them in this book are just, I think, well-rounded to help any child, you know, um, be their best self. And it actually, I actually practice these affirmations with my son. We write them on our mirror each month. And it's funny when you have never said anything nice to yourself, like in all these years, right? Like having that positive, tone or that language to yourself can feel very uncomfortable when you aren't used to saying it. And so when this month it's I am brave, and we look, in the morning before he goes to school, we say it. So yeah, the ones I mentioned are just some of them, but all of them in the journal are the ones that I love.
That's really amazing. And, we tend to be harder on ourselves than other people. We don't talk to ourselves kindly. So, you're alluding to it. So let's jump right into the journal. So it sounds like you collaborate not only with your co-parent, but with your child or children as well.
Hmm. That's right. It really is a family journal. So this version it stays with the child. It goes with them back and forth because I wanted my son to have a piece of his dad and I wherever he went. Um, but it's also a planner. So his schedule can change, like sometimes things happen. We need to switch up the schedule. So we put that in here, and I wanted to give him that sense of control and feel empowered that, like, hey, I have a say in my life. I'm not just going to be bounced back and forth. If you're feeling something, let us know. Um, and each day we write in to get together. My child's only 6, so he can't write by himself, but having a moment at the end of our day where we take 5 or 10 minutes to review the day, talk about anything he felt didn't feel good about, or something that scares him that made him happy, like you want to know all those things.
Like a check-in.
And yeah. And there's faces in there. There's 5 faces, and he can circle one or all of them, and sometimes he circles all of them, and he tells me why he was crying today, why he was mad today, or so um it's such a great window into your child's world to understand them, because sometimes he surprises me sometimes with things that happened like a couple days ago that I wasn't thinking about, and he's still thinking about it,
Yeah.
so
It's going to become very reflective and introspective.
Yeah, it's I never journaled myself until I got older, but when you do it with a child, and especially whose mental health you want to stay on top of, given the situation of 2 homes. And like I always wonder, I'm like, sometimes he asks me, like, can you and Papa live together? It's not often because we do our best to normalize it, but it still comes up. You see 2 parent households all the time, right? So it's only natural that he has strong feelings and is curious and feels certain things. And I just think that the earlier we give our kids the space and a place to share, they will always come and tell us. And I would never want him. I always want him to feel safe to tell me or his dad, no matter what it is, right? No matter what.
And that's a great tool even for children that aren't in 2-parent homes, like you said. And I think especially kids are going through so much these days. I can't even imagine being a child during this time. It's all that they know. And at the same time, it's like looking at it as from a parental lens, you're just like, oh my God, there's social media, there's this, there's that, a lot of hate crimes going on. And it's like, we continue to facilitate finding your voice, using your voice, and standing up for what's right. And it's really uncomfortable, even for me. And I think this is a helpful way for our children to kind of check in with themselves, communicate, and really reflect with their family on how they're doing. So you've done a lot of work on yourself. How do you continue to take care of yourself as a working professional, as a mother, as a woman of color, because this is an ongoing process. It doesn't just end after, a session or writing in the journal. It's continual.
Yeah. I could do better. It is extremely hard being a single mom and having a business, trying to just surviving in LA. It's really stressful. I do meditate. I have been doing this since I separated. So this was 2019. It's been 4 years now. I'm not consistent, but I'm trying right now to get back on a regular schedule, but it's been hard. I think when I notice that where I'm not well, I make sure I start with the basics. Make sure you eat well, make sure you sleep, make sure you meditate, right? And
How do you know when you're not feeling well? What are the signs?
I think I keep a planner. I actually have planner journal myself. I don't know if you use one, but
Yeah, I love the Passion
yeah.
Planner. I've been
Oh
using
my
it for
gosh,
years.
that's what I
Yeah,
use. Yes.
we interviewed the CEO in season 1, and she's just amazing.
I follow her too. And I've used the Passion Planner for, I think like 3 or 4 years now. But I use it as like also like my journal and planner because sometimes I don't plan out my days.
Sure.
One of my signs is like when it's blank, when I don't write anything, I have nothing planned out. I'm usually like very overwhelmed. I've been not sleeping well, so I think I'm just at a point where I'm stressed out about like work and, being a single parent, it's tiring. Um, so yeah, I would say like not sleeping when I don't have things planned in my planner, like that's a sign. Um, I think sleep is the biggest one for me. Yeah.
Yeah, sleep hygiene is just so important and very, very hard in terms of turning off devices an hour before bed, making sure you have a routine, especially, and you really deserve a trophy, a medal, all the things for being a single parent and really being so involved because, I mean, fortunately, we're a two-parent household, but I just sometimes I can't even imagine, and you're so strong for doing that. So,
Thank you, Stephanie.
yeah, be kind, going back to those words of kindness, like I recognize that that's so difficult and you're doing so much better in terms of looking at yourself. So how can others find the journal? And I think you mentioned that even though the episode will come later, you are launching a journal for everyone as well. So can you tell us more about where people can keep an eye out for those updates?
Yes, my website is homesweethomesjournal.com. Those are my same handles on TikTok and Instagram. I am relaunching this journal, but it's going to be rebranded. It's going to be, I actually haven't told anyone yet, so
Oh,
you're going to be the first.
exclusive.
Well, the name of it, I'm actually going to change it from Home Sweet Homes, and it's going to be called The Story of Me by Us, a Family Journal. So that's the new name of it. And it's still going to be all under the Home Sweet Homes umbrella, though, because I think ultimately my goal is just to facilitate a way for families to have happier homes
Yeah,
and
definitely.
more connected and strong, loving homes.
Thank you so much. And I know that you're super busy, so I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your journey because this takes vulnerability as well.
Thank you. I know it's one of those things where you're, I don't say ashamed, but a part of you is like, oh, it's hard to talk about, somewhat shameful.
It's uncomfortable.
But yeah, but now I'm like, you gotta own it, right?
Absolutely.
We're shaped by the things in life, and I feel like we're meant to be where, because of, the things we go through.
Absolutely. Well, you are so strong and you are brave, girl.
Well, I encourage you to write that on your mirror.
Yes.
It's a great way to practice.
Thank you for tuning in. Remember to support us for free by subscribing to our mailing list at colorsuccesspodcast.com. There, you will find our socials, YouTube channel, and all episodes on streaming platforms for great additional content. As Rob Heaps from Partner Track said, success is contagious, so come catch it.